I'm making roasted tomatoes with garlic, which, I mean, it sounds like such a mundane name for something that is so loaded with flavor. One of my favorite ways to preserve tomatoes, but it is a little bit more labor intensive. What I'll start with is 12 pounds of Roma tomatoes. I'll place them in the oven under broil and continue to turn them as the outside skin blackens. It takes a good 20 minutes or so. The tomatoes have begun to blacken on the surface, which is what we want, and I can already see the skin starting to peel. And so then I just turn them a quarter of a turn because I want every single side of them to get blackened. That's what gives the flavor. The ones that are on the bottom, they don't have as much of the blackening because of course they have the one on above it. If you wanted to, you could do it in 2 goes, but I feel like this works just fine. It'll just take the bottom a little bit longer, probably after I pull this one out before it really starts to go well. Sometimes it's a little hard because they want to slide right back to where they were at, and I just kind of stack them up against each other, and that seems to help. And I'll continue to do that until all of the sides of the tomatoes are nice and blackened. And as soon as the top shelf is done, I'll switch the bottom shelf out to that top location and it'll go really fast. While I'm waiting for the second tray to blacken, I'll just start the next step, which is to load my tomatoes into a brown paper bag. I found it's really important to do this on a tray that has a big lip, otherwise the juices will go everywhere. And these skins are already coming off. It's just gonna be so easy to do this later. The hardest thing about using the same tray is that I have to kind of shift things around a little bit. And then I'll set these aside, allow them to cool, and check on my other tray. Next, I'll prepare my garlic, which I do by chopping the tops off. This is gonna be 6 bulbs. If you have smaller garlic, then you might have to do more of them. And the key when you're cutting them is you want to make sure, like this one here, you can see that I was able to get the inside of it, but it didn't get the outside bulbs. And each of them has to be exposed. So I'm going to go around and make sure that I've got those outside bulbs as well. The reason it's so important that the tips show is because that's where the oil is going to get drizzled on, and that's also where we'll press them out at the end after it's all roasted. I kind of try and do a little bit of a curve to it so that I catch all of the tips, but at the same time I'm not, you know, wasting a lot of the tips of them that I'm taking off. Oh, this one has some really big cloves to it. It's good. I find the bigger the cloves are, the easier this process is. I then place my cloves with the cut side up best that I can because sometimes they try and fall over. So that one I'll probably sandwich in between 2 of them because I really want those cut sides to be on the top so that it'll catch that oil. And then I just drizzle it with olive oil. I don't even weigh this or measure this. You could if you wanted, but for me, I just make sure that there's enough on there. And one thing you can do with the leftover oil at the bottom is make some fresh bread, especially like a sourdough, and then you can use it to dip in because it'll have both the oil and the garlic flavor. Super good. And then I'll cover it with foil and put it in the oven at 350 degrees for 20 minutes. While the garlic is baking, it's a good time to do the tomatoes. I still need to peel them and seed them. It'll go pretty quick. My husband actually loves to eat these little skins, so I don't get rid of them. I just save them for him. Sometimes he likes to dehydrate them and use them for in soups, which that would be a good thing too because it has that roasted flavor to it. Sometimes he'll just eat them plain. These skins really do come off well, just like if you were going to do a blanching of them. It's kind of messy work, but that's all right. Isn't that canning? You know, it just goes hand in hand. So then I just slice my tomatoes in half for the seeding of them. That seems to work pretty well with these Romas. Sometimes you have to cut them a little bit more. If they have a really big core, sometimes I'll remove that, but generally speaking, I just leave the core in and take out the seeds. If you don't remove these seeds, there's so much extra juice to it that it'll change the ratio as far as the spices go, the amount that you would need. Just kind of dilutes everything. So sometimes it's tempting to not take them out, but it's just a good idea to seed them, even though it takes a little bit of time. Now I'll remove the tin foil and set another timer for 10 minutes. Now the timer's all up, the roasted garlic's done. With the tomatoes seeded, now I just kind of line them up next to each other and cut them down. I don't want them really tiny. I probably go, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch. And I just kind of cut along them. And then I line up the next batch and I continue. I'll now take my 6 cloves and I just squeeze out the garlic portion. It's kind of fun, actually. I don't know why, it's one of those like strangely satisfying things, because you have the little husk here and you just kind of push it and the softened bit of garlic just comes right out. And I'll do that to all 6 of these. I did let it cool down quite a bit because the last time I did this, I burned my fingers pretty well. With that oil on there, it can be kind of hard. It smells so good though. And I just continue through every one doing that. I almost feel like I'm milking the bulb to get the cloves out. The hardest ones to get are the ones that are in the center, or if you didn't actually nip the top of the little garlic clove, then it's hard to get out as well. And then I just chop those cloves up into small bits. And you don't want it chopped down so tiny that you're not gonna get bits of it when you eat, but you want it small enough that they're not going to be, huge chunks. You want it to be able to just be dispersed nicely throughout it. I will then finely dice 1 large onion. So now I combine my 12 pounds of tomatoes with my 1 large onion, with my garlic from my 6 bulbs that's been roasted and then finely diced. I add 1 tablespoon of oregano, 1 tablespoon of basil, 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. So then I'll put this on the stove and bring it to a simmer for 5 minutes. And just look how gorgeous that is. I mean, you can see the chunks of onion, the chunks of garlic, and it has that roasted smoky flavor. I actually really love it. I'm going to fill my pint-sized jars up to 1/2 of an inch of headspace, the space from the top of your food to the top of the jar. But initially, I need to leave it just a little bit lower so that I have room to put in my lemon juice, because this needs a little bit of added acid in order to be able to process it in a boiling water bath. Whenever I make this one, I just get so excited about the idea of having it in my pantry because it really is flavorful. I mean, you can add it to anything. You can add it to soups, spaghettis, anything. I'm a really big fan of that roasted flavor though, so that might be why I like it so much. At this point, I'll take my chopstick and I'll make sure that there's no air bubbles left in there. And just kind of press things down on the top so I can get an idea of exactly how much space I have. It's a good idea to use something wooden like a chopstick, because if you do metal like a butter knife or something like that, you can scratch the edges. Now I do have one that it looks like it has a little too much, so I'm going to pull that out because I'll need some space to put in the lemon juice. And I'll do 1 tablespoon of lemon juice in each pint. Then I've got just a couple that need to be topped off. Not much though. I think I'll have just a tiny bit for my taste tester. I think it's a good idea for everybody to taste test a little bit, just because, you spend so much time making these and then you don't eat them for a couple of weeks because they just go right in your pantry. I don't know, it might even be worth just keeping some out of one jar, eating it for dinner. Then I'll put my lids and rings on fingertip tight and put them in the boiling water bath. These are actually going to process for an hour and 20 minutes if you're at sea level. I'm at 1,200 feet, so I'll be going for an hour and 25. So it's quite a long time. Now I'll need to make sure that I have enough water in the boiling water bath. It needs to go 1 to 2 inches above the jars, especially when it's for such a long time. I don't want the water level to drop too low. With it at a boil, I set the timer for an hour and 25 minutes. Now that the timer went off, I'll take off the lid and allow it to cool for 5 minutes. The roasted tomatoes and garlic are all done. An hour and 20 minutes. Isn't that an insane processing time? But again, totally worth it. This recipe, I mean, it's a little more work, but in the long run, what you get, so worth it. Usually what I do is I'll try to just make other stuff on the same days that I'm doing this, since I'm in the kitchen anyways. So today I made some chili and some beet relish as well as this, and that just made it so I was able to utilize my time better. I place my jars on a heat-resistant surface. I make them 1 to 2 inches apart so that they can cool nicely. And then I'll let them sit for 24 hours before I remove the rings and wash them with warm soapy water, paying special attention to the threads. But now I get a taste test. I have some leftover French bread that I think would be fabulous with this. So let's see. I'm gonna get it all loaded up. You know, the one problem that I have with doing the taste testing on video, well, besides the fact that you can't taste it, which would be lovely if you could, it's that I take a bite and then, well, I have to talk with my mouth full, and that just goes against the grain. So. The roasted tomatoes, the roasted garlic, so good. I'm gonna go give my husband a bite of this, because I don't want him to miss it. It's the last of what I had left over.